Hi everyone and welcome to my updated Twisting Blades Rogue Guide for Season 4. This is an evergreen on the Rogue. A lot of people have played this build in the past and it's still quite up there with other builds. It's not like the top tier, not even among the Rogue builds, but it's very playable. It works just fine. If you really like the Twisting Blades Rogue or melee Rogue in general, then this is the way to go. So I went back and updated the macro guides and the planners with all of the Season 4 itemization, min-maxed it to the teeth. And what you see here right now, the clips that I have from the PTR, they are very unoptimized. But to give you a bit of a frame of reference, this build was also able to clear Pit 200 in like 3 minutes or so on like the higher end. Once this was fairly min-maxed, so it was quite up there with other builds in the PTR. However, in the live patch, the difficulty has been generally raised in the pit, and I guess we're going to see a bit more of a gap between this and other top builds. However, it's still fine, it's still a formidable build, especially for speed farming, and super fun to play. So let's get into it. So there are various new options that make this build a lot more enjoyable to play in my opinion, and just feel a lot better in general. Number one is some of those temper mods, including the poison imbuement count. So you can see this here, you can put this on the rings and on the amulet. This is a resource temper that can go on those 3 slots, and you can get a lot of poison imbuement count. Even without crazy masterworking, just 1 rank masterworking crit on each of them, you can get +9, so you have a total of 11 poison imbuement charges every time you use it. This works for the other imbuements as well, but in this build in particular, we're going for poison in order to scale our damage the highest possible. Not just that, but you can also get a lot of skill ranks now as well. You can see this here. You can get 10 ranks to poison imbuement on your helm, for example. So this is a really great scaling for this setup. And on top of this, we can get damage versus crowd controlled on tempers as well on our offensive slots. You can get a lot of that as well. So you see this here, this setup right now has over 1000% damage versus crowd control, giving us a pretty big multiplier for close quarters combat, which is almost comparable to the Season 2 values pre-nerf. So because of those temper mods, this build gets a lot of its power back, even though the Twisting Blades bug fixes happened and the Poison Imbuement bug fixes. It does have solid damage output. It's not gonna melt everything in the game instantly, but it just works. If you have played the Twisting Blades Rogue in the past, in particular lately in Season 3, then you might remember my Shadow Cold setup that I was, for example, running on the Maxroll guide. I think that is no longer really viable, at least for higher end content, because the bar has just been raised. And in order to scale the damage the highest, you will go poison on Twisting Blades. However, for early game, you can still do exactly this. So for example, if you look at the leveling guide here, I have Shadow and Poison. We can also do Shadow and Cold, for example, if you really want, at least for a while leveling up. But eventually you want to go the Poison route, just because you have the most synergies there. And as you can see here, with those extra imbuement charges, those extra imbuement ranks, it does just scale the best. Another pretty cool novelty here about this is that with those poison imbuement charges, you actually no longer have to rely on procs like bursting venoms in order to sustain your poison procs. You can play a full poison rogue without even having bursting venoms as an aspect. This is the aspect that spawns these poison puddles with a lucky hit chance, and standing in them you reset your poison imbuement, which was usually the way to do this, but you no longer actually require this, at least once you get those temper mods online. Before that, I actually do have like a progression set up here, the leveling. You might want to go for the bursting venoms if you get it, and then just put it somewhere on like one of your items maybe, if you cannot get those temper mods early. So this is like an alternative, and this allows you to kind of like easily get your poison combo going all the time. Another pretty cool novelty that I put into the setup here is also the volatile shadows aspect. So we have this here. This is the one where when you get hit and you have dark shrouds, you will explode and apply shadow imbuements to the target. So this was changed. And you see here we are spec'd into shadow imbuement even in the late game, even though we don't actually have it on the bar, because we can trigger it from volatile shadows. So we run the Umbers aspect, we use Puncture to get Umbers procs for the dark shroud stacks. And this way we can use volatile shadows to then get shadow explosions. And that is also kind of nice. You get some extra crit. you get the extra non-physical damage done, and you also get some of those pops, at least against smaller enemies. Those shadow pops can still do a little bit of damage, and especially open world content, you can actually have pretty speedy setup despite playing the poison setups. So you have really good elite damage, really good boss damage, and then sometimes those pops even automatically just from playing the game. Another novelty with the tempering system is the Twisting Blades effect. I keep getting this question a lot when I played on the PDR and also after when I started playing and theory crafting this build here. Twisting Blades effect is probably some of the weakest modifier that exists for any core skill in Season 4. Unless this is changed, we don't know exactly what has been buffed and nerfed and changed here with the tempo mods. But for now, assuming that this stays something like what it was on the PDR, it was actually fairly little impactful. However, there's not really much else to put here as a weapon temper. And what it actually does, Twisting Blades effect, is that it increases the extra damage done by to the impaled target. So you see as here in the tooltip in the third line, enemies take 8% increased damage from you, and then after X seconds they return to you. So for a little while, a bit of extra damage to the target that you have impaled with Twisting Blades, and this will be raised with the Twisting Blades effect. So overall, this is a somewhat weak temper for Twisting Blades, which is part of the reason why it's not really like a great build, like one of the top builds or something. So maybe that gets a pretty heavy buff, we'll see. I do have a lot of hope here, but ultimately this is what it does. If this is not getting buffed, then I will actually change this Twisting Blades effect here and actually put Caltrops stuff there. There is actually a Caltrops duration and a Caltrops size temper that you can put on your weapons as well instead of this, which at least for boss fights would be absolutely preferable, because Caltrops are a really powerful tool that a lot of rogue builds will be using in Season 4, just because it just gives you so much extra damage here, in particular from enhanced Caltrops. And extending the duration and increasing the size obviously helps a lot with the skill's viability. Instead of like getting this tiny bit of extra % damage taken from the Twisting Blades effect, I will actually go down that route. But I do expect a buff here, but we'll see. I might change this. Other than that, we also have new tempo mods here. For example, Puncture casts twice. Again, Puncture is our basic skill. We use this to build our combo points. So I usually want to do like a 3-to-1 combo, like 3 punctures, 1 Twisting Blade, making sure that you don't spend too much resources, making sure you don't spend too many of your imbuement charges. So it kind of works itself into the build very naturally. And it gives us some other effects, like the ambush procs for the Dark Shrouds. And we also have a lot of healing from Siphoning Strikes. So having the chance to cast twice gives us, for example, doubled value from this. It gives us doubled value from the Umbers, and also some other effects. For example, we have chance to freeze, chance to stun, chance to mobilize, these kind of things here as more tempo mods on our armor pieces, which are also pretty impactful. So you can kind of like trigger a lot of stuff very easily using Puncture and this chance to cast twice mod. Now for your legendary aspects, there's also some new stuff here that is pretty fancy. I talked about the volatile shadows, but there's also a new one here called Concussive Strikes that gives you extra damage against dazed targets, and that actually goes into an utility slot, which is pretty cool. So you get a chance to daze. We also just daze naturally from using Twisting Blades here with the improved Twisting Blades upgrade. So that's like a very nice defensive tool here. And we also have the Smoke Grenade in there, so when you just throw a Smoke Grenade into a pack, you will also daze them. And then we have the Noxious Ice that goes with chilling and freezing enemies. We are freezing kind of naturally, as I mentioned, for example, from our procs here, we have chance to freeze on a chest like this. And like this, you can easily trigger Frigid Finesse, for example. I did talk about Azure Wrath in the past when the PDR came around, before we knew about all those temper recipes. Just to be able to freeze enemies, which is a very powerful modifier here. We also put Frigid Finesse on our Amulet, for example, because it's such a strong passive, and you can so easily freeze enemies now with just those temper mods. So we really want to try to capitalize on this with Noxious Eyes, with Frigid Finesse, and so on. Then we have Assimilation. This is also kind of a new thing here. Allows you to get Fortify. So you get Dodge, and then every time you dodge, you Fortify for a little bit of your life. And basically, after a little while in a run, you'll be fully fortified, giving you a 15% damage reduction, which is pretty nice. So it's relatively comparable to a normal defensive aspect. Then we also have Might. Since this is a common point build, Might always just kind of fits in really nicely. And about the armor, we don't run Juggernaut. we just get 9.2k armor pretty easily by having like 1 or 2 rolls here. I think I have it like here on the pants and here on the boots, and then a bunch on the Paragon, and that's basically it. So as long as you hit that number, you're fine. You could theoretically do this with Juggernaut, especially like maybe early on in the progression when you don't really have the items exactly that you want. You could throw in a Juggernaut somewhere just to get that armor, maybe like around level 70, 80 or so. But ultimately, you don't really want to do that, and you want to have more evades available. And it's not really a huge opportunity cost to get that armor elsewhere. Then we have the Blade Dancer aspect. This is the most important one. This is the Twisting Blades Orbit. So it hits 2 more times around you for 60% damage when you put it on a crossbow. This also carries the poison imbuements and helps us out with just more damage in general. We have Umbers here. This gives us the Dark Shroud stacks. So you heavily invest into Dark Shroud, just like basically other rogue builds. Any other rogue build will really run this in the pit at least. For the high-end content, you want that damage reduction. Rogues are generally kind of squishy, and this is your tool to survive. So we have that here. Then we have Corruption aspect. This is really powerful for poison builds. So we want to stack up the poison, the imbuement effect here with us. We have Rapid, just to make the build more smooth. We have Elements aspect. It's kind of like a whatever aspect. It's just some extra damage sometimes when it comes around. Otherwise, it's not active. And we have Accursed Touch to make enemies vulnerable. So you may wonder, why is this in here? It's not really that useful. Well, I think actually it is, especially when it comes to like AoE combat in higher level pits, for example, when stuff actually lives a little while. The only real sustainable way to make enemies vulnerable otherwise would be puncturing everything one by one. And I don't think this is really that, good to the good AoE damage. So in that case, we run Accursed Touch just to spread vulnerable reliably against all targets, triggering our Corruption aspect, triggering our extra vulnerable damage that you might have from gear, the 20% base multiplier, and so on. So I think this is pretty valuable. On our skill tree, as I mentioned, we have Puncture and Twisting Blades, of course. We have the Caltrops here. This is just kind of like a bonus that you use sometimes on elites and on bosses, mostly because of the enhanced Caltrops. Early on, when you don't have any of those freeze tempers and stuff, you might want to go for the chill Caltrops. So I think I might actually have this here in the starter version, for example. You can also trigger Frigid Finesse this way. Just throw the Caltrops and get a big bonus multiplier and eventually even freeze targets. But later you don't need that anymore once you have the tempers, and you just kind of freeze stuff by attacking them, and you're going to be fine. The Smoke Grenade in here, this is a really powerful defensive tool in a late game. You walk up to an elite pack, you throw the Smoke Grenade, everything is dazed. You proc a bunch of your damage buffs for like this one here. And you can also reset the Smoke Grenade cooldown by just attacking those targets that have it on them. So it's a really nice package here that it just comes back quickly and gives you extra damage bonuses. And lastly, the Poison Imbuement here. So we don't have an ultimate or anything, we just have this. You try to activate this as much as possible. Essentially, you want to try to have every single one of your Twisting Blades poison imbued with 3 comp points in order to make the most use of this and then not run out of charges. I have a 1-point Shadow Step here without upgrades. You could take Discipline Shadow Step. There are like some points to remove. For example, trigger text is not really required or so, depending on your liking. There is like a few points you can move around here, or you don't necessarily even need, like, for example, the Smoke Grenade. So if you, for example, want to go faster, especially while leveling or speed farming, in fact, I actually have that here in the speed farming variant. I have a dash in there, for example. So you don't really need this to be successful. So for Hell Tides and so on, I would just go full dash here. So there's like a few skill tree swaps, as you can see, if you want to do that. Or for example, for bossing, the Smoke Grenade also doesn't work. We pick up a dash instead. So there are some slight tweaks that I put here in those setups in case you want to like min-max a little bit for different types of content. Other than that, I actually kept most of the setup in place just like it was. So if you're doing like a swap for speed farming, obviously you don't want to like swap half of your build around, and also the Paragon stays the same. For example, you see this here, I kept everything the same, but for example, like 1 or 2 aspects might change. So for speed farming, you could do like a Ravager's aspect on your boots, for example, to get those double Shadow Step charges, which is really nice. Or for bossing, like it doesn't really apply there with Ravagers. You can go a Hectic aspect, and this allows you to like more reliably get your cooldowns back. But other than those small tweaks, you can actually just take your pit setup and kind of do everything, maybe with like a skill swap or 2. And here's the Paragon board. So this is a 6 board setup with 6 glyphs, and we have a bunch of important legendary nodes. So we have mostly the poison synergies. We have the Bane glyph that gives you a chance to deal double damage with your poisons. We have versatility, which actually buffs your poison imbuement by 15% because it's a non-basic, non-core skill. We have the turf here for damage reduction. This is a close DR. We have the control glyph for extra damage to crowd-controlled enemies. That helps with the close quarter combat key passive, first of all, and also it has a pretty powerful secondary effect here against stunned and frozen enemies, which you can do basically all the time. Tracker glyph for more poison, and finally here the efficacy glyph as well for more imbuement, basically poison damage as well. And I tried to pick up a lot of extra life here and a lot of damage reduction. This is a fairly tanky setup, but it is a melee rogue. You want to try to have a lot of life. You want to try to have a lot of damage reduction. You see here this planner has over 40% dodge, over 46,000 life. So I went kind of ham on the defense. And potentially, if you don't try to push super high in the pit, you probably don't need all that much defense. But the more the merrier, I think. And if you want to tweak it for your own liking, you can definitely do that. The most important legendary nodes and how they work, you have to be aware of the cheap shot. So the more targets are around you that are crowd controlled, the more damage you deal. So in particular, when you fight very tanky targets and they become unstoppable after being crowd controlled for too long, you're going to lose a lot of damage from all this damage versus crowd control that you stack. We have over 1000%. Remember that. So most of your additive damage category will be against crowd controlled enemies. Then we have cheap shot as well. And we have frigid finesse as well. So when all these effects drop because monsters become unstoppable, you're going to do like 80% less damage or something like that. It's going to be very noticeable. So you want to try to avoid that, or at least kind of like dodge around, not necessarily go into the offense when they are unstoppable. And in case you're actually doing like a high pit push, for example, you want to try to play around that and come back when the unstoppable has dropped, because there's so many different buffs to crowd controlled enemies in this build. Then we also have the exploit weakness here. So every time you hit enemies, they take 1% extra damage. So you kind of ramp up this damage buff. It's especially good against bosses. So this goes into every rogue build, mostly for that reason, because boss damage on rogues is just somewhat weak across all builds. So we use this here, and this is also something to be aware of. You don't deal all of your damage instantly. You kind of ramp it up a little bit with this node. And then lastly, we have the Eldritch Bounty here. So every time you use your imbuement skill and you attack with it, then you get this extra 20% damage buff. And you also get extra res against poison. So you get like slightly less poison damage taken, which is nice. One thing to note here, this build is actually fairly easy to set up as long as you have those temper mods. So at some point you're going to get those temper manuals, you're going to imbue your imbuement count, and it's going to feel a lot better. If you don't have that yet, again, go with the Bursting Venoms as long as you have to, and then switch to this. Also, you see here there's actually no uniques in this setup. There's not really a reason to run uniques for anything, because you don't really need Tibort's Will for the resources. We have resource cost reduction on our crossbow, and that together with the combo point playstyle just kind of souls everything. We can't really go with a Harlequin Crest because we need those poison imbuement ranks. Like 10 ranks is just too much to give up to run a Shaco here, I would say. And we also lose an aspect and so on. And there's not really all too much else. The only thing I would recommend maybe would be a Doombringer, because those temper mods for Twisting Blades are just so weak in case they don't get buffed. You can go with a Doombringer and just enjoy being an Omega tank that just doesn't die anymore, because it has a lot of extra life. So you can drop something like the Elements aspect here, have the sword, and yeah, that's gonna feel good. Also, a lot of people ask me, what about like an Inner Sight Twisting Blades rogue or something like that? I would say not really. Inner Sight, even though with the buffs, it just doesn't really cut it these days. In particular for high-end content, you will have a lot of trouble actually triggering the effect, because the higher level the monsters, the more damage you have to deal to them to get the Inner Sight gauge filled up, to the point where you just never fill it. And on top of this, it doesn't even work with the poison damage. It only works with direct damage. So if you want to do anything with like an Inner Sight Twisting Blades work or so, I do not recommend, unless it's for like health height farming or something like that. Sure, you can do almost anything there, but when it comes to like higher end stuff, no way. You have to go combo points. And that concludes this guide here. So hope you enjoyed this. I wish you good luck in season 4 with the rogue or whatever else you're playing. Personally, I'm quite excited to jump into the season, try out a lot of stuff. Even after playing the PTR, there's just like so much more to explore, including this one. I definitely want to play some Twisting Blades again and see how far I can get in the pit of this. So good luck, Hope you enjoyed this, and see you guys next time.